fortunate today. First of all, let me say that I'm Anita Finley, and you know you've been watching a lot of our Boomer. It's it's really Boomer Times, and we now have a special thing that we do. We're so happy in the sense of not doing radio anymore because we now are on Zoom. So it's now called Zoomer Times. And we have very special guests. And I must tell you that today you're going to hear someone that you probably would be able to see on CNN or one of the major broadcasts, but he's a friend. And he actually is Book of the Month in our August issue. And I'm going to put the book up. It's called Fighting Pollution and Climate Change. Put it up here. I don't know if the light to get it. But he is really an expert. And I'm so glad that we made the acquaintance, Richard. You really are a very special person. Do you know that?
Well, to have a friend like you, I guess I am very lucky. Yeah.
Right. Well, but you worked very hard on this book. By the way, how long did this book take you from the time that, I know you've had it in your mind, but from the time you started writing, how long did it take you to put that together?
It took me about a year.
That's all.
Yeah. Well, it's a lifetime, and it just comes to your mind, and you write it down. And some people can write a book in 6 weeks. I couldn't do that.
Sometimes it takes 3 to 4 years too.
Right. Well, in my case, it really took a lifetime, but to write it took a year.
Well, you should be very proud of this. I had to really labor through it because it's all very unfamiliar information for me. And I like that. I learned an awful lot. There were times I was very depressed because I didn't know of any answers, but then you always have a positive click to it. But I just want us to let everyone know why they should buy the book, because I don't think there's anything like this that'll make them realize what's going on. And they should save it, give it to their children, give it to their grandchildren. It should be almost like a Bible. And hopefully our new administration will, or whoever comes in, will realize how serious it is. So I'm going to let you talk. I guess the first thing, and we talked about this, is, of course, you were a professional. Why don't you tell everybody, very quickly, in an elevator speech, what you did for the government?
Excuse me. Well, I started in the state of Maryland, where I was an elected state legislator and a state prosecutor of environmental offenders. And that took me to EPA, where I rose to become our nation's top lawyer for all criminal investigations by the Environmental Protection Agency of pollution crime. And from that, I went the longest time was 17 years doing foreign affairs, teaching other countries how to have EPAs and have clean water and clean air around the world. So I've seen it at the state, national, and international levels.
And it must be terrible for you in a way, because you see it all happening, everything you predicted, and you're powerless in a sense. I mean, even if we had a government that really cared, it's pretty far down the road. So I don't know how you manage. I guess the best thing you could do is to get on shows like this and just tell people and try to make them aware of what you know. So of all the things in your brain and on your plate, what probably is the most important aspect of everything?
Well, the most important thing is climate change. And there are lots of ways that we're hurting the planet. But the one that's going to do us in, possibly, is climate change, because it does threaten human extinction in about 200 years if we continue business as usual burning fossil fuels. And that's the insult that I really end my book with. But I start off with extinctions that are going on anyway of other, we're killing other animals, and we're using pesticides in a way that poisons us and poisons other animals, and I also talk about the success of controlling stratospheric ozone. So we have good stories and bad stories, and we also can do it globally. I'll just mention the biggest global success in terms of an environmental treaty was really the 1960s ban on atmospheric testing of nuclear weapons. which not even the North Koreans have violated. So, once the world is awake, the world can pull together and try to save the world. And I think we can do that. I'm quite hopeful, but we're 40 years too late, but better late than never.
Exactly. And I guess the way that the public sees what's happening is if they're living in communities that are being flooded, or they see the animals in Alaska, or they hear about all the destruction of the glaciers. So that's on a big level. But you, of course, as an attorney, and your credentials are sterling, and all you had to fight, uh, this is a bold question, but is it greed? Is it money? Is that why people, the big companies, won't do what they know they should? Is that the basic?
Well, when you do criminal enforcement, you only see the bad side, and you're only dealing with the worst. And yes, some of them were really big corporations that are household names, uh, and uh, and you think like a cop after a while. But so I was on that track, and then I had to have an attitude adjustment when I went to work internationally, where was, oh, there's some good companies, and maybe we can encourage them and invite them, and they will come along and cooperate. So there's the whole range of people, there's the whole range of corporations, uh, and I'm not just all about criminal enforcement. I'm also about market-based incentives, and we can talk about that too. So we have to use the whole range of tools to deal with the good and the bad.
And I'm laughing to myself when I see the windmills. Don Quixote would be very happy with those windmills, wouldn't he? And now they're not that old, are they? When did they start to get popular?
That's a really good question. Uh, After the oil, you remember the oil crisis in about 1974 when we were all standing in the
Yes,
gas lines trying to buy
right,
gas? Right.
exactly.
So were the Danes in Denmark, but they
Ah,
decided that they were going to go on a different course, and they hadn't discovered any oil in the North Sea yet, which they do have a small share. So they were 100% reliant on imported oil, and they decided to impose a carbon tax, to develop renewable energies, and the most remarkable thing they did was to establish the company Vestas, Vestas, which was the first and biggest. Denmark only has 5 million people. Well,
huh.
Vestas has plants. It has a dozen plants around the world. They're making the first and the best of the wind turbines, and they just went on a different course because they weren't owned or by special interests pumping out fossil fuels. They were the first, and now of the, say, the top 10 wind turbine makers in the world, only one I think is U.S. It's GE. I mean, we've really lost it's another market we've lost, like we lost so many
Oh,
to foreign competitors who outthink us.
and you call them turbines, I call them windmills. What is the
Well,
proper word?
the Dutch, had mechanical windmills early on, pumping out the polders or whatever they are behind the dikes.
Uh-huh.
But these are electricity generating windmills, and the Dutch has them all lined up too to make electricity to pump out their fields when the big ones come in the North Sea. But wind turbines is what we should be calling them today.
And you and I talked a little bit about this. So the farmers who really, their farming isn't doing very well, they get paid for the turbines, don't they?
Yes, and up and down the Midwest, from I think from North Dakota all the way down certainly to West Texas, where I think T. Boone Pickens put in some massive wind farms, and uh, so even in the heartland, you might not think would always be progressive, and where there are plenty of oil interests as well, there's a real affinity for wind turbines now. Uh, so that's another good thing. It's not just all about the oil anymore. It's about renewables, and in fact, solar energy is growing quickly too. Although here again, I mean, we've lost the production of solar panels to China.
Huh.
We don't have a manufacturing policy to keep our good technologies at home, and that's one of the sad aspects of this. But that can change too for the better.
I'm gonna tell you, as you talked about the solar, when I was first married, and that was in 1955 or 1956, my my husband at that time, his parents had a house and they had solar. And so, because it was very hot in Miami, as you know, and they only switched on for the electric when there wasn't enough heat for their water and all. So this was not something new. Why did that stop?
Well, the early solar panels were just to heat water,
Oh, I
and
see.
yeah, and indeed that's used still widely in many places around the world to heat water. Uh, but the more modern panels are what they call photovoltaic and generate straight out electricity.
Yeah. So it's funny, we're kind of reinventing everything in a sense, and yet we keep going forward. And the other thing that you talked about was the atomic energy. I was fascinated by that because reactors, we all were so nervous. But why don't you share? That was a very good part about your book. I learned so much.
All right. Well, let me find a few notes. I want to say about technologies. There are really two technologies I'd like to talk about. First is atomic energy, uh, and it's nuclear power is the only source that will handle the baseload demand uh, when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, on dark and still nights, and it's the only source that's climate friendly and constant, meaning it can power the grid at all times and is not intermittent like wind and solar are. Uh, Now, we're all familiar with the early reactors. They're called light water reactors that were commercialized starting 50 years ago. We have one down below Miami, and there are a number, and they're reaching the end of their useful lives. But we should be keeping them in service because they're producing a great deal of electricity that is climate friendly. And what most people don't seem to realize is that we have new advanced designs that are absolutely safe. They can't melt down. They can't blow up like a nuclear bomb. Well, the light water ones can't blow up like a bomb either. Uh, uh, they uh, they cannot. The advanced reactors cannot be used to make nuclear weapons, and they'll also use as fuel the nuclear waste that's stored in pools around the present commercialized reactors. But they don't quite know what to do with it. The U.S. government keeps talking about burying it in Yucca Mountain, but don't do that and make it. It's fuel. I mean, save it and use it for the new reactors. And these new reactors are various. They call thorium reactors. You could Google all this, or molten salt reactors, or integral fast reactors. And people like Bill Gates and China and South Korea, maybe Russia, they're all going to be very smart people are going to be building them soon. And they're going to come on as small modular reactors. Now, uh, you've heard of the s'mores, the Girl Scout cookies, s'mores.
Yes.
Well, I'm talking
Yes.
about not SMRs. In my parlance, are small modular reactors, not Girl Scout cookies. But sometimes it's confusing. I'd like to have a Girl Scout cookie right now. But anyway, they're the size of big refrigerators, and China's going to be making them in shipyards. There won't be the cost overruns like the massive plants we have that we see today that never seem to that just absorb so much money. No, these will be made in shipyards. They'll be shipped out to a waiting world. How many do you need? Do you need one? Do you need two? Do you need 20? Line them up in a row and plug them in. They'll work anywhere. I mean, and it's another technology that we're going to lose. We are losing it, like flat screens and iPhones and iPads to China. Because we're not paying attention. Bill Gates is paying attention, but unfortunately, he doesn't run the government. So that's the story on
Well,
nuclear
let
reactors.
me ask you a question about that.
Hmm.
Is it because people are afraid that they're going to blow up? Is that how this all started? Why they didn't accept it?
Yeah, yeah. Jane Fonda's movie, The China Syndrome,
Yeah.
came down just before the 3 Mile Island episode in
Right.
Pennsylvania. Now,
Hmm.
the 3 Mile Island episode, nobody was hurt by radiation from that. Nobody was hurt by radiation from Fukushima. Uh, Now, Chernobyl did kill some people. Uh, the reactor was terribly designed and it was bungled the way they were running it. Uh, and the Russians didn't tell people in time so they could have taken the iodine pills and prevented a lot of cancer because they were covering it up. So there was lots of bungling. But the truth of the matter is that nuclear power already is the safest power. Uh, it's estimated that from ordinary air pollution from making electricity from coal kills, I've heard 7 million people a year, and that's around the world, you know. But it's safe to say that 1 million people are killed by coal-powered electricity for every one person that's ever been killed by a nuclear power plant. And even the old power plants, the ones that were commercialized, they can't blow up like a bomb. They just can't. Uh, they can melt down, but the new ones won't. And so we got to stop freaking out over nuclear power.
Yeah.
It's just something people have to learn about and come to appreciate and get started on. And as I say, a lot of smart people already are, but most of them are in China or Korea or someplace.
Well, let me also tell you, this giant of a man, Richard W. Emory Jr., an EPA Veterans Guide, now how to join in saving our life on planet Earth, called Fighting Pollution and Climate Change. I'll throw this up again. Do you have a book with you? If you put it,
Yeah, yeah.
just put it up, it might show better. Yeah, that's
Okay.
better. Yeah,
Well, let me just say, Anita,
yeah.
that is my badge on the front, and it's one of
Okay.
my proudest possessions. But I was not a federal special agent. You know, they're like FBI agents but work for EPA. That's an EPA special agent's badge. Uh, I was awarded that because I was their national legal advisor, and I wanted it on my cover because I'm very proud of it. But I also think it's eye-catching. But
Yes.
the point of the cover is to show that America and the flag represents it, is fraying, and we're falling apart
Yes.
by failing to address uh, climate change, and and the badge is sort of tilted because it's caught in the wind too, and you see the hurricane up.
Right,
I
I
have the
didn't catch
hurricane.
that.
Well,
That's
law
right, the
enforcement is
flag's tattered. Oh my heavens. Yeah.
and law enforcement is being skewed and tilted over by the hurricane in Washington. So that's the cover, and
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it turned out well.
And I think everyone ought to really, it's one of these things. You know, everybody knows how to cook some spaghetti or to do different things, but sometimes you have to learn about something you have no idea about, because I know that only because I asked Richard to be the book of the month did I wind up doing this. And I probably wouldn't have purchased this if I didn't know him. And that taught me something. It taught me to go into ideas that I had no idea, that I didn't know about. Of course, we know about pollution and the fact that, yeah, we have our yellow and we have our yellow baskets and our blue baskets, and we're supposed to separate things, and that was something, you know, our glass from our plastic. But this is such an extraordinary book, and we don't have time for Richard to explain his early years, which are really quite interesting since he grew up, you know, in Maine, right? In Maine, and it was Maine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and we'll have you on another time anyway, but I wanted people to realize it's really important, whether you're retired or if you're just watching this as a boomer or an even younger, you need to learn some things, and you need to learn it from an expert, someone who doesn't work for the government now, someone who can talk freely, who's seen it, who understands it, and is just praying that people will catch on and make a difference. This is because you have children, you have grandchildren, you're worried about everybody. And I don't know what I can do personally other than just keep talking to you, letting people learn about you.
Well, Anita, you're fun to talk to in any context at any time about anything. So we don't always have to talk about this, but God bless you for taking up my cause. I
Oh
do
no,
appreciate it.
it's, I live in an area where when it rains, I mean, it's right off the intercoastal, and there are restaurants,
Yeah.
and the streets look fine, but when it rains, just a heavy rain, it literally floods the way to get to that restaurant. So, and that's just rain. What is going to happen over the next 5 years, Richard?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 years, but the sad truth of the matter is it's too late to prevent catastrophic sea level rise because with carbon in the air at 417 parts per million, and we've also got another 100 parts per million of other chemicals in the air, nitrous oxide, refrigerants, propellants, and methane. The last time that we were at 417 parts per million was 3 million years ago, and the sea level rise was 65 to 85 feet higher. So unfortunately, it's baked in that we're going to lose Florida. The only question is when. And uh, beyond that, I'd like to mention extinction because the geologic record shows also that when we get to 1,000 parts per million of carbon in the air, and if we continue at the present rate of going up 2.5% a year, we'll get there in about 200 years. That's the rate at which human extinction, which life on land has been ended, and most of the at least four of the five past extinctions. And what happens is 92% of the carbon goes into the sea, which is a good thing because otherwise, if all the carbon we put in so far were in the air, the average global temperature would be 120 degrees. Right now, we'd be dying like flies. So instead, we're killing the corals, and the canary in the coal mine is the corals. Uh, but once the sea gets so full of carbon it can't hold it anymore, it becomes anoxic, and meaning without oxygen, and it emits hydrogen sulfide gas, which is a poisonous gas. The sky turns green, and life on land will be over. And that's what's happened in four of the five past, maybe all of the five past extinctions. The only possible exception might be that asteroid that hit the Yucatan when that may have caused a nuclear winter. I mean a climate winter instead of a climate summer. But most of the times it's been too much heat from the magma burning through the coal deposits and whatnot. That's what's caused the previous four extinctions. But we're doing it on our own with putting fossil fuels into the air. So now people ask me, do I think human extinction is likely? I don't think so, because I think the flooding would be so terrible and so soon that our young people will see it. Young people like you're seeing it, and it will stop because people will start to care when they're walking in it and can no longer ignore it. And then we'll go cold turkey on fossil fuels, which we should have done 40 years ago. But I don't think humanity is going to face extinction. We're going to be much diminished. We're going to have to retreat inland to higher ground and rebuild all our cities and everything else and all our infrastructure. But we should rebuild the electricity grid anyway. So,
Well, let me then just
uh-huh.
give you, let you be an angel with a magic wand here. So we're going to make you not president so much, but in charge of, of global warming. Okay. What would the first thing that you would do if you had no money, was not an option, no problems? Okay, Richard Emory, we want you to do something big. What would it be?
Well, the first thing you have to do is restore the Environmental Protection Agency, so you have a working government agency that has solved. I mean, it's already solved a whole lot of air pollution problems. I mean, acid rain and uh, took the lead out of gasoline. We know how to solve air pollution problems. Climate change is just another air pollution problem to me. It's just one more. So you got to restore the EPA, and the mechanism that I favor is called. We've already used cap and trade to take the lead out of gasoline in the 1980s, and we stopped acid rain in the 1990s using cap and trade, but we don't really have time for that now. And we have to use something called the carbon fee and dividend. And this is where you tax carbon and rebate all the money, and then people can take up electric vehicles and solar panels, and uh, or they can continue paying the carbon fee for the dirty electricity. But most people will go to the cleaner sources because suddenly it's cheaper, and that can be done very quickly. And there's already legislation in the Congress to have such a law. So I'm in favor of that, and I think that I'm not alone. I mean, there are a lot of conservative leaders, and our listeners will know James Baker and George Shultz and Hank Paulson. These are conservative national leaders. Republican appointees to the Council of Economic Advisors, the Federal Reserve, a long list of Nobel Prize winners. They all favor this. Excuse me. Because it's a market mechanism. I'm going to have a drink of water like Marco Rubio.
Okay,
Hold on a
but
minute.
besides that, we're about out of time, so it's just perfect. But you see, you did today what, I know I have a lot of notes from you, but after reading your book, reading your notes, I wanted people to get the essence of you and how fortunate we are to have you in our next one we're going to do in September. But, and maybe more, because you're a rare, pardon the expression, bird. I mean, it's a very unusual to have someone like you with your experience, and you are very articulate, and I learned so much, and I have so many more questions, but thank you for taking your time today, and we will get you back again. And don't give up, please. Just help us.
Anita, I'm glad to have you a friend, and I'm happy to talk to you anytime, any place, anywhere. You're a blessing. And
well, I want everyone to know, if you're looking for an extraordinary speaker, get in touch with us at Boomer Times, and we'll get in touch with Richard so he can come and talk to you. Thank you, Richard, so much.
Thank
Richard
you.
Emory Jr., Fighting Pollution and Climate Change. Thanks again.
God
Bye.
bless.